Alexis, and I'm joined here today with Thomas and a very, very special guest. We got Herr Burse himself.
Woohoo!
Yeah, man,
Yeah, and
he's a
so,
legend.
yep, there he is in the flesh and blood, or the pixels, I suppose.
There you go. It counts. It counts.
Yep, sure does. And so, yeah, we're here to give a little Christmas special. And so, Herr Burse, I
Yeah.
wanted to know, so there's a lot of things that just everybody knows there's a sort of barrier between teacher and student, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to know what are some parts of your life that sort of go across that barrier? What can you tell us about your job and how it all works?
So I feel like the part of my job that everyone sees and notices first is like the actual instruction in the classroom. And, I do enjoy that. Like the higher level, the class goes, the more enjoyable the content is. And also the experiences with students. And when you think about it, it's much less like what's right or what's wrong and what are people thinking. And that's much more interesting to hear. Um, but I feel like the part that people don't, I guess, as readily see is what happens with like the honor society or even in like the rapport that we're building with each other. And that's honestly my favorite part. Like getting to know each other, seeing our sense of humor, getting to connect not only like, student teacher, but also two individuals working on the same service project or two individuals there for the same event. And I don't know, I just find that much more enjoyable. And of course, there is this barrier between student and teacher, right? We're not supposed to fraternize, but I think you can still build really meaningful relationships outside of just instructor and recipient of knowledge. Because there's a lot. Like I learned something new from you today, and I think even that rapport of us talking. Knowing that learning is a two-way street, and also that we can both bring something interesting to the table, it just makes it much more valuable, like all the interactions we have.
So you value like the sort of academic stuff, but without the grades, so like the NGHS stuff and like the actual community.
I value the academic, everything that we're doing academically. But even if you take, I think, grades away from it, it's because like, I mean, grades are important. They're benchmarkers, la 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 la. But it's honestly the conversations that we have, the learning from each other, like the debates, the arguing when we disagree, and even sometimes the inside jokes. Like that's what it's about. And I think as a language teacher, my end game is for you to communicate in the language. And if we're communicating with each other, if we're building relationships with each other, that's a major win. So I think that's much more important and also much more meaningful than like what's the grade and synergy.
Hmm. I think that
So
too.
you got me curious now. What is your opinion on grades in general and how those work?
So
Since
that's a good question.
that's a pretty major topic on this podcast because it's all, student life and stuff. And coming
Yeah.
from a teacher's perspective, I'm curious. Yeah.
And honestly, grades are tricky. And I'm sure you guys have noticed this. Depending on the course or depending on the department, there's a different number of like expectations for like what grades look like, how much each grade counts, even maybe the number of grades you should have in synergy. So, like with foreign language, you should always have about 30 grades by the end of the semester. With German, I always try to do a little bit more than that so that one grade's not going to make or break you. Actually, one or two is not going to make or break you because real life happens, and I know that. Um, I think grades are important as like benchmarks for learning, but I don't feel like grades should be punitive. I think they should be benchmarks so we can measure success. But I think there should be like the opportunity to grow and do better. I hate seeing grades as like a punishment or a source of stress because we all have like enough stress in our lives, and I don't feel like grades should add to that. Um, and again, I think so. I think like I feel like grades are important. However, grades should not be a source of like major stress. You have to have enough grades so that one or two grades isn't going to hurt you, and your overall performance is going to be much more important than what you did on like a single day, or right, like for one test or quiz, or maybe how you performed on a single project when maybe that week was just really busy for you. So I think, and that's interesting. No one's ever asked me this before, so I'm sorting through my own thoughts, but I do think they have a place. I think they're important. They shouldn't be a source of punishment. I think everyone needs to be aware of like what the grades are and aware of those expectations like beforehand. And I do think if the goal is really learning and improvement, that should also be reflected in grades. Which I think you see probably maybe your language classes and English classes more like with an essay, right? You have your first draft. That's not going in the grade book as your, summative score, because everyone would be pretty disappointed, right? But it's like, okay, then we're going to do a second draft, and then maybe even a third draft, and then you're finally going to get what's going in there. So that end score reflects like your ability, your understanding of whatever the content material is, the honing of your craft, and also any kind of learning that's taken place. So I think that's a much more accurate and like important marker of success than say something that you took on like a test, right? And I think before I ramble, I think that's like my opinion in a nutshell on grades.
I have another question around that because there's only three benchmarks for success in grades. Like the 70 to 100 is considered passing, while there's like
Mhm.
seven benchmarks of failure. And I think,
Yeah.
like, do you feel obligated to like curve the grades upwards just to get in that passing mark, even though like something that's average should be statistically 50%? Like, do you feel obligated to like make it uh
Oh, I
curve the
see what
grade
you're
basically?
arguing.
I feel like there's two kind of things I want to hit there. And sorry, I adopted two new kittens. One is napping, and one is really craving attention. So if you hear meowing, he is also expressing his opinion. There we go. So I do feel like the scale um, really doesn't make a ton of sense and can kind of set people up for failure. Um, especially because we don't account for D's, right? And anything below a 70 is not passing. So even if you do have a D, what does that mean, right? You're still failing the course. You're still not getting that credit. Um, so I can understand, right, if you're thinking about, okay, well, actually, like half of 100 is going to be 50. So why are we saying you need a 70 or above to pass? And I think we really do have this system of like A, B, C, F here. Um, so I can see the issues there, and I think I'd be definitely receptive to some changes, right, or some updates in the system of like how we're grading and what that sort of spectrum of grades looks like. For me, I do not curve grades. Um, I feel like your grades should be an honest reflection of what you did or what you can do or like what you produced. And so I don't believe in kind of, curving them one way or the other. I'm pretty against that. But I hopefully I kind of stick to my own philosophy and I have enough grades in the grade book, enough variety in grades so that nothing's really a punishment.
Hmm.
And so that, by the end of the semester, everyone is getting a grade that they truly like earned and deserved. But I don't curve because if you're curving, I feel like there's some issues. Either you're curving because the students underperformed, which actually probably you're curving because students underperformed. But why did they underperform? Is it something that you didn't teach well? Is it test questions that you didn't write particularly well? Or is there something else like afoot? And I think in those scenarios, you really do need to reflect on like what you're testing and how you're testing it. But I don't know. I've never really been a fan of curving.
So, do you feel like the 10-point curve for AP classes is justified, or should it just like go away?
I don't feel like it is necessary. Um, and this might be a bias, or I might be seeing this through like a lens of someone who's primarily taught at university and then also at our school. But I think a lot of the classes have the same level of rigor, right? They're mostly gifted or AP. or even, collegiate classes. So when we're talking about rigor and like workload, they're probably all kind of crossing over to very similar things. So when it comes to AP, I think I personally do kind of think of it as like a numbers game. And if students are doing work, let's see, this is interesting. If students are doing work, I feel like they need to be evaluated honestly, and just kind of slapping like an extra 10 points on it really does. Is that because that's a true measurement of what they would do, of how they would perform maybe in that class at university? Is that like a reward for taking an AP class? Like what does that really achieve? And I think if we're talking about like the curve with AP, our school, we have classes that are above AP, that are actually collegiate level classes, and you're not getting the 10-point curve there. So
I think you do, don't you?
For
if you're,
math, you do, but I don't know about the others.
do you get that in like number
Yeah,
theory and different
for
and
multivariable, we
everything?
do get the 10 points.
Okay, okay. Thank you for you provided that to me. I didn't think that you were getting like a grade boost there. So I guess if we're treating all college classes like that you just automatically get a 10-point boost, then I guess I'm okay. I'm okay with that, but I still, I don't know. I don't know how necessary it is. And I also don't know if you would guaranteed just do 10 points better. You might even do more than that. And honestly, I probably think most people would perform better than just like a 10-point boost, because at university, you're probably only taking four or five classes and not, 7 or 8 with an internship, and trying to struggle with that time management. So I don't know. It feels, at least there's a system in place where it is across the board. I like consistency, and I think that lends at least like I don't know.
So I have some thoughts about it too. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
cut you off.
Yeah, no. I'm curious because I love these questions because these are not things that I normally talk about. So you're causing me to think, which is great.
So to set extra points, it's consistently inconsistent across the board. And what I mean by that is, I looked at a video before where some guy was interviewing some Harvard students, and the Harvard valedictorian, I don't know if that was valedictorian for the undergraduates or just for her specific grade, freshmen's, but she had something like a 4.8 or 4.9 GPA, and that's just not possible at, a GSMST or the vast majority of high schools across the county or even USA. And so, because like, how do you even do a 4.9? You have to take AP classes every single time, and you can't even do stuff like dual enrollment if that counts, because that just crushes the GPA. And
That's your
so,
thing with dual enrollment. You would just get, even if you have a 100 in the class, that just goes in as a 4.
yeah, exactly. And so, I'm almost curious, what do you guys think about instead of a specific number jump, you instead did curve grades. And so, for example, if somebody were to have a 90, you would take those 10 points that they don't have, cut it in half, and add it to their grade. So like almost a 50% boost on what they don't have. And so this will look different across the board. An 80 will go to a 90, a 70 will go to an 85.
So there's a 5-point curve.
Not a 5-point curve. You take half of what they don't have to get to 100, and then you add it to the original grade. A 50 will go to a 70. Does that make any sense at all?
You can create a curving system more complex than what the
Yeah.
Georgia has for the milestones, man.
Okay, no, hear me out. So you take, so if you have something like an 80, you're missing 20 points to get to 100. If you cut that in half and add that to your 80, that would be the curve that I'm proposing. And so
So an 80 is
this,
a 90, a 50 would be a 75.
yeah. And so I don't know. I've never been to college, obviously, but that feels more like what they do in college than just a 10 raw 10 points. And it would cut that 5.0 garbage out.
So I understand your complaint about the 5.0, because I think that isn't fair, and that really is dependent on like the institution the student is studying at. So I think with some universities not looking at that 10-point curve, that's to try to get back to a place of fairness, because there is this recognition that, a student who's maybe going to a very special prep school, who's been taking AB classes for almost every class since freshman year, is going to have a very different GPA of someone who might be in a very rural area that only offers maybe 2 or 3 AB classes. And so I can understand how that does not have everyone at very equal footing, and why that can present some difficulty when comparing GPAs and making value judgments on students, or even their future capabilities or success based on the basically on GPA on a 5-point scale. But and that is an interesting proposal for a solution. I don't know. I feel like I would probably say the easiest thing is to take it away, and then just kind of evaluate everyone. Like, how are you performing as is, without any curves, without anything, and then you have one measurement for all high school students in the country. And maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but I feel like that's the simplest solution, and kind of works for me. I like simple.
In my opinion, I think the GPA should just get rid of. Just use your grade average. I don't know why we have a number to represent another number. Just makes no sense to me.
So you're more of a fan of just the numeric average versus the GPA?
Because for GPA, 1 point can make a 25% difference in your GPA. Well, it's only a 1% difference in the grade and average, which is not
Yeah,
reflective of what your actual performance was. So,
yeah.
going from
That
an
makes
89
sense.
to a 90 is just 25% increase in your GPA, but only a 1% increase in the number.
To be fair, Thomas's idea is probably the best so far. GPA is who needs GPA? Because we've had that same sort of debate on this podcast before. How say a 94 to a 95 makes arguably zero difference, but a 89 to a 90 is a world of difference, or even a 90 to a 91 because of how AP classes work sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know why do we have GPA?
I don't know.
That is a fantastic question that I cannot answer.
Probably bureaucracy.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Maybe it's something like with the SAT to get a new measurement of measuring how good kids do, but eventually over time it just devolves into nothingness. I don't know.
Too hard to say. We got to do some digging sometime onto why GPA is its own thing. Because I'm sure it wasn't around forever, just like how grades weren't around forever. Because, oh, that brings me back to something I had earlier. The way that grades are right now, it feels that they're more quantitative rather than qualitative. And what I mean by that is each assignment, it's not, it doesn't feel as much a reflection of the quality of the work as it is the quantity of work done. And what I mean is that every everybody does an assignment and everybody fits a rubric. And if you do the rubric, then you get a 100. It's that doesn't reflect the quality of the work always though, because the quality is maybe only a quarter, a third, 40, 50% of the rubric, and that's not the entire thing. And so
Oh, do you think the rubric's not really reflecting all of the quality? So then there's an issue with the rubric, which then means there's an issue with the grades.
yeah, and so if you change it to more of a qualitative approach, you would naturally reflect grades more towards the average grade would be a 50 rather than whatever it is right now, maybe 85, depending on the class.
I can only imagine the depression rates when the average grade's at 50. like,
Well, that's okay. So hear me out. That's how it was in Romania. In
well,
Romania, you
it's
don't
a
even
different
have a
culture
scale
here.
for. What was that?
It's a different culture here. So to implement that change, you're gonna have a lot of hurt and a lot of pain.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't know. It's just hear me out. In Romania, you don't even have 0 to 100. You have 0 to 10,
I
and
was actually going to ask you about the system, because in Germany it's 1 to 5.
yeah, and in Romania, if you get a 5, you pass. And this is all coming from memory from what my dad told me. He failed a bunch of different things, and it was still worked out for him. It's a much more qualitative approach there, and so if the grade average is a 5, then you have more room for this is high quality, this is low quality, this is like you didn't turn in, this is you turned in. a masterpiece, right? So I don't know.
There are such things as like there are different types of rubrics, right? You do have the analytical ones where you're seeing like the point evaluations per every category and why, right? And then you have the more holistic rubrics, which can speak to more of like the qualitative final product of something a student turned in versus really nitpicking it like every little category. But then, you know, I think the issue with holistic rubrics sometimes the grading can be a bit subjective. And so then there's like a right if you have two people evaluating quality and you know one person might be better informed about the topic or you know what they're looking at is more in tune for like the expectations, right? There can be some point fluctuation there. So I think with the analytic, even if even if you're I don't know, even if you feel like someone's really trying to or like the key to success is just making sure you do everything in those rubric categories even if you don't have the most like convincing or creative end product it's much more like objective but it's tricky and I think depending on the course you'll see teachers using like both of those um, and I like to think that at the end of the day we all are much more concerned with quality rather than like quantity of assignments or like a quantitative analysis of like what the student did versus like how well they did what they actually supplied.
I mean that sort of like rubric you're talking about subjectiveness. It kind of just reminds me of the complexity point for the AP exams, where like the entire basis is you know it when you see it, and it's just there's and people don't like that. Like it's probably one of the most hated parts of the AP exam. So I can see like you can talk about ideals about like grading something based on its quality, but quality is not objective, and like
Yeah.
there's people don't like uncertainty, and like having that uncertainty of the quality can make a lot of frustration come out of it. So I don't know. There
Still
is an
having
argument
thoughts.
for both.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm still having thoughts about it because there's definitely examples of classes that are mostly quantity rather than quality, like econ. Econ is it's I don't even know how many grades are in the grade book. Thomas, do you have any idea? Is it like 80, 70, something like that?
Well,
90?
I would
90 grades in synergy.
I'd put like 60 to 80 probably something
That's a
like
lot. I've never heard that because I know of some departments where they might only have like 10 to 20.
that.
No, not econ. Not econ.
But at
And
that
so
when you get your progress reports and you're seeing the like actual breakdown where every assignment I think at that point is going to be less than a percent. Like it's weight. It's just going to be less than a percent.
I think the
So I
problem.
yeah,
don't grade like for German. I can tell you, I don't grade everything we do. I think I grade like a third, probably of what we do. That just seems way too exhaustive. And then I think at this point, each
oh, did he lag out?
I think it cut out for a second.
Oh dear. Herr Burse, are you back?
oh yeah, did I go out?
Yeah, you went out for the
Yeah.
past 10 seconds or so.
No,
I think
I just
it's.
shared like the secret of life.
We shall never know.
Yeah. And now it's gone. Like it was only with me for a second and then lost knowledge.
Your cat
Uh,
knows.
yeah. So what was I saying before it cut out?
I think
Uh,
it's
we
just
we
like
were complaining
how.
about econ and
Oh, that's true. I think I was just surprised that there's really that much. And I'd be curious, like, what your impressions are as students when you look at your progress reports and you see that many assignments, and you also see that, like, each item is less than 1%.
Well, that just leads to like people not doing homework, which I do have a few NTIs for my homework. Because for econ especially, it's like we we don't have daily homework, but we have like probably 2 to 3, maybe even 4 homeworks a week.
it's
So
just about daily.
yeah, and I and the way the homeworks are, it's all basically quizzes on my EP classroom, and I just don't really want to do them like every day. So sometimes I skip them, and they really have no detriment to my grade. So that's just my mentality towards it.
But also, why do something if it doesn't really? if you have so many that you're still getting like the necessary practice, and it's also so many that like it doesn't have an effect on your grade, I think I too would probably be like uninspired if I'm being honest with you to kind of work on that daily. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, and that goes back to my quantity versus quality argument.
I don't think
Yeah.
it's just the quantity of the homework itself. It's just like the format of it. It's just all basic quizzes that have no like. I mean, it's not intellectually boring. It's just like it's not interesting at all, and it just makes someone like at least sometimes I'm just like no, I'm clicking through it and I just get a 50 and I'm just like okay. So
So I think a lot has changed since I was a senior in high school and in my AP Econ classes. But I always did the homework for that, and I actually enjoyed the class. But I never studied, not a single time, and I got fives on the exams
that's where
just
I'm
from
at
like
now.
doing the homework, like
You're
paying it.
so lucky.
Or I'm a genius.
One of the two. You're lucky
There you
to
go.
be a genius. I don't know.
Ooh.
Hey.
I mean, that's the thing I am. Like, I'm kind of like, I don't study unless it's like a final performance final. Like, if it's just a quiz or a test, like, I maybe study like 10 minutes just to have a little refresher. But apart from that, like, I'm just good. So, and I mean, I, my GPA increased last semester, so it's working out.
That's a win. That's a win.
Yeah. Less work for me and still get the results.
I feel like as a teacher, I shouldn't say like that makes sense. But I'm also going to be authentic with you. So
hmm And I think actually, like, studying so much can be a detriment to people, especially if like you lose sleep to study and like all you do is study and just like mentally fatiguing yourself for the actual exam.
yeah.
So, and that's
And
my
I'm on
excuse for
the
why I don't study.
no, I'm going to hop on a bandwagon again because I've always been a massive proponent of, relaxing and going outside and touching grass and, not giving yourself astigmatism from being on a computer all day long studying. Is it astigmatism?
I believe so. Like to develop astigmatism, but it's kind of like a non-count noun, and so you have like an astigmatic eye or two, which I have two astigmatic eyes. So I have astigmatism like really bad in both my eyes, which it got worse from digital learning and literally staring at screens all day. My prescription got so much worse, and I feel like I see at almost like a 90-degree like angle. It's interesting.
I'm just gonna
So
get
yes,
latex.
go outside, touch grass.
Yeah, don't
I'm just
study
holding
stuff.
out till I get latex. Not like
It,
LASIK.
True.
I was
What is
like,
it? Not latex. LASIK surgery. Like laser in the eye. Yeah, to fix it. I'm just
yeah,
holding out.
But that stuff isn't permanent, is it? It lasts like
It pretty
four
much
or five
is.
years, and is it?
I think so.
I could have sworn it's not permanent, and you can only get it if you have really, really bad eyes. I don't know.
I think there's been a lot of progress. And again, I am no optometrist, um, but I think there's been a lot of progress. So I think it's considered like pretty permanent. However, like as you age, right, you might need to get like reading glasses and stuff. But and I think before there were certain people who weren't necessarily like ideal candidates for it. But now I think regardless of a lot of vision issues and complications, like most people can get it if they're interested.
And I can afford it, of course. In the good
That
old
is true.
US of A.
Yep. You know, healthcare in the U.S., which is another topic.
Maybe break it. We won't even break into that. Healthcare. I don't even.
I mean, just to ask one question. How is the Gwinnett County healthcare? Like the public, do they like give you healthcare?
um,
I think it's all federal or state, right?
so they provide you with healthcare options that you purchase
Oh.
and have monthly deductions from your paycheck for. But healthcare is not a gift in the U.S. and
I thought for at least the public workers it was, but
everyone's. So I think I spend about 300, 400 a month on health insurance, but that is health insurance. I think my health insurance by itself is 160. So it's probably more like 250, because I'm thinking my health insurance is about like 160, I believe. Of course, if you have a whole family of like dependents, that drives the cost up. And then dental insurance, eye insurance, any other things, any other insurances you have going on, I pay for life insurance as well. So insurance is a lot. I wish I could like pull up my paycheck and I could tell you like, oh, that's why this is much less than one would envision. But I will say that our health care that we have access to is better than like a lot of people. But it's still healthcare in the US is like astronomically expensive. And even though I have premium dental insurance and I pay for the premium, it's still hundreds of dollars if I go to the dentist.
Oh yeah.
And like, I need a new crown. Even with insurance, you're paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So you do have to still like save up to take care of a health concern, even if you're buying the maximum insurance that you can through your job. So
I have a fun fact actually. I don't know how well this applies. It might just be dentist to dentist, but I heard before that there's people that no dental insurance. What they can do is they go to the dentist, they get some work done, and then they say, "I'll pay cash." Right, it's completely skip the insurance and everything, get the real check, and then they pay a reasonable price. Because
Oh
the
yeah, I
issue,
know what you mean.
yeah, because the issue with insurance and all that and the astronomical prices is that insurance wants a cheaper price, and so what doctors do is they just raise their normal prices so that they can give insurance at a cheaper price, and everybody's happy except the people that don't have insurance.
Hmm.
So if you can just tell the doctor, I'm not doing none of this, I don't even have insurance, I'm just going to pay cash and get it done with.
So there are two like kind of complicated things there. Sometimes doctors won't even see you if you don't have insurance, and so that's kind of one thing there. I will say for dental insurance, when I was in high school, and there was a little bit when I didn't have dental insurance and I just paid out of pocket. And I remember paying for a root canal in high school out of pocket, and I think that was like 2 grand, and like with the crown that I think was like probably 1,600 of that. So that that was like out of pocket without insurance, and that was not cheap. Um, but a lot of times, doctors won't even agree to see you as a patient if you don't have insurance. And I don't know if hopefully you haven't, known anyone or had to do this yourself. But if you go to the emergency room, when you're checking in at the emergency room before anyone sees you, you're asked about all your insurance and how you're going to pay today. So like you can be there for like a really critical issue, and before they're even going to see you, they're asking you about money. And like last time I was in the emergency room, I was taking a friend there who was really, really sick, and he couldn't communicate that. And so I was having to like, I'm just his friend. I was like going through his wallet and finding his insurance cards and trying to like negotiate that for him. And he was just trying to be seen,
Yeah.
you know? So it's tricky. Healthcare is a tricky thing. I really prefer the way it's done in Germany, but that's okay. That's okay.
I would prefer. I mean,
So
yeah.
in Germany, it's a big social thing, right? Like you take a cut out of your taxes and that pays for healthcare for everyone, right?
Yeah, and you can of course have like private insurance if you want, but everyone's insured. And again, like taxes are a little bit higher in Germany, but your government's doing a lot for you, and you don't really notice it.
I was about to
Yeah,
ask,
not
like, what are the tax rates in like Germany compared to the U.S.?
I It's been a while since I've looked, to be honest, but I don't know. I would have to do some research. I would hate to like misquote,
Hmm.
uh, but they are higher. They're definitely higher. But when you're going grocery shopping and stuff, and even looking at sales tax, all that's included in like the price of food, so you immediately know how much everything costs. It's really easy. Um, the only thing I ever noticed being really expensive was maybe like kind of like luxury goods and stuff that had a major like price hike. But
gas.
with sales tax and stuff always being included, that just made it really easy. I didn't really notice anything leaving from my paycheck. I earned a fair amount of money in Germany, and I worked like 30 hours a week max. So it just, you know, I feel like I was really appreciating life, and so I was definitely okay paying a little bit more if it meant that I was going to be taken care of. And then there's public transport everywhere too,
Yeah.
so that also takes like a little bit of a stressor away. And you also know you're going to like money that you're paying is also going to like fund all of that.
And I was about to say, like, even if the tax is higher, like, you're still, like, kind of being taxed by just paying for insurance at the US. So it's not like it's living is just cheaper in the US on a daily basis. I don't know. I don't know if it is, but, like, you still have to pay the insurance, which is may or may not be higher than, like, the tax you would pay in Germany. So
Yeah.
it's not exactly like a one-to-one comparison about the tax rates.
Yeah, it's complicated to do those full comparisons, and of course, the U.S. is so huge too that if even you wanted to have like a systematic change, it's so much trickier to do on like a large scale. But yeah,
Especially
no,
with local
there's
control.
I'm almost certain that. Oh, did I cut out? Oh,
I perfectly fine.
Oh,
oh, okay. My bad. I'm almost certain that gas in Germany is significantly more expensive than it is in the US.
Yes.
But they also have the
yeah.
completely different systems where you don't need to pay for gas.
So yeah, gas is really expensive in Germany, but I feel like the only times where that was really an issue because I don't think you drive as much unless you're going on vacation and there is public transport everywhere. And I feel like if people are driving, they usually have like much shorter commutes. So if you're looking at a gas station, you definitely see like writing you're paying by liter, so you have to do a little bit of math, but it's so much more expensive. But like the amount of driving in Germany is like this compared to the US for you to even notice that.
Is there like in Germany, is there like public transport to the suburbs, or like do suburbs even exist? Because like cars aren't as big of a deal, or do like just everyone live like in the city?
No, so there. I mean, there's really big cities, there's smaller cities, there's suburbs, there's towns, there's actual like villages. Uh, so one of my friends lives in a village, and uh, they have. Oh, but even yeah, in this village, and I think this village has like a pharmacy, a bakery, a dairy, like cow museum, and then just houses. So this is in Bayonne. Um, but even in like this like really small village, which is just like dairy cattle museum, one pharmacy, and one bakery, they still have like a train station. And it's like a one stop. You know, you only have a Regionalbahn coming in, which the so if we're talking about trains, there's a lot of different types. You usually have like the ICE, which goes between cities and even it's like in other countries, and like that's a really high speed train. Then you also have something called like the Regionalbahn, which will go typically to like different cities but within the same state. Um, and so smaller towns and villages will at least have a bus station, or they'll have a stop for like a Regionalbahn, which is going to be a lot slower. And then it's going to be mostly the cities and like bigger cities that have like the ICE. Um, but I remember seeing that. That was an eye opening moment for me because there, you know, you expect a city to have like several Bäckereien. You expect to see like several Apotheken, but like even seeing in this really small village that just had one of each, and they still had a train station and they still had public transport for people to use. That's what it really like kind of solidified. Like, oh my god, Germany does this so much different than the US, and I kind of love it. So, I mean, it's everywhere. Like, even if you live in a really really small town, you might not have a train station, but you're at least gonna have a bus station. And I've had the experience that all the places I've been, including villages, have still had at least that one train station and bus station. So, yeah, it's. I mean, you don't really need your car to be honest.
I mean, yeah, that's the I guess one major downside of the U.S. is just we talked about this a bit on the last podcast, but like just the public transport in America makes it so unfriendly for pedestrians. Well, the
Yep.
lack of public transport, I should say, makes it so unfriendly to like pedestrians, and like you just get to a place where the cities aren't really touristy. They're just more like there's this one region, and then everything else is either commercial or industrial. So
I was actually having this conversation with my fiance yesterday. We were driving, and there was a bike rider, um, like on this road that connects to the highway, but there's no bike lane, and it's a really really busy street. And then just in Athens, but a really busy street that connects to one of the main highways, which we call like the Loop because it goes around Athens in like a big circle. And I was really worried for them because especially around the holidays, people are off, more people are driving, and there's no bike lane, and a lot of stuff in Athens is pretty old, and so there's smaller streets anyway, and it's not really safe, and so it's I feel like in a lot of places you really in the U.S. you are in this environment where you really need a car because everything is so spread out, and even city planning was not designed for pedestrians or designed for bike riders. It was designed for people in cars, and so yeah, you need it.
and just the necessity for the car just also increases expenses in the U.S. If to continue on that topic, so there's a lot of stuff to consider when like taking into account like what place is good to live and everything like that.
That's
Excuse me, excuse me for playing the devil's advocate,
oh
but
oh here it goes, here it goes.
don't forget the U.S. is also massive, and the stuff that we did do, like the intercontinental railroad, is that what it's called? I don't know, the continental one, the one that goes from transcontinental. That's what it is.
Yeah, trans.
Transcontinental railroad. That was a massive project that is still a pretty significant railroad today. And when you look at the U.S. interstate system, that is one of the largest projects any country has ever taken on at any point in history. And so, if you were to try and do public transport for every part, like Germany is probably the size of, I don't know, what does anybody happen
I
to
think
know
it's like
what
close
size
to
it is compared to state?
I think like California or Texas one. It's like it's generally bigger, but it's not. I
It's
don't
not as
think
big as
it's yeah.
I would say like maybe Georgia, Carolinas, and Tennessee put together.
If we were to make public transport with Germany's budget for Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas, we would have the best public transport in the entire world.
I mean, we have done some amazing stuff. That's true. And I mean, if you're in certain cities like Boston, Boston's really easy to get around, and there's public transport there, and it's also very like cyclist friendly. And I think you have pockets of like places that are doing it really right. But I think because we are so huge, there isn't really an easy fix on this large, scale. So I think you have pockets.
To do a little counter, to do a little okay, you want to go?
No, I just neurons activated. You know what I'm smelling? I'm smelling econ and all of those monopoly firms, those natural monopolies.
To
So
do a little counter on that little U.S. is too big to have public transport. The entire European Union is kind of interconnected. Like the European Union spans from Spain. I'm pretty sure Spain's in it, right? Yeah, Spain, basically from Madrid to Warsaw, and like there's so much public transport within that region, and not only is that pretty much the size of the U.S., it's also within multiple different countries. So not only is it the same size, but it's also significantly more difficult to get the countries to cooperate and build that infrastructure and have intercompatibility with each other compared to just one country doing it on its own. So it is definitely doable, and I do agree with the fact that like the interstate system's a marvel of infrastructure. Like it is probably
Oh
the
wow.
it's a probably one of the best pieces of infrastructure within the world, just the size and usability of it. But it is definitely possible to have a continental size public transport, especially with the US budget.
so going with natural monopolies, that's an econ topic. And so to give an example for anybody that's unaware, something like utilities are a natural monopoly because either the government controls it or a private company controls it. So like for water, you can't have multiple people running the water because it's just too expensive. You have to have a single person, and then you have to have taxes and subsidies supporting them. And so I don't see why we can't do that for railroads, honestly. Or any kind of like bus
It
system?
is done by railroads. It's called Amtrak.
Nobody uses Amtrak.
That's exactly like Amtrak has been. I don't I don't, but Amtrak could definitely be used. Because the thing is, Amtrak needs to run at a loss to be feasible. Because like to actually be usable, going from rural city to like rural city, there's not going to be enough demand to like gain a profit, but it's still for the public good. So it's going to need to run at a loss. But there are laws that basically require it to be profit maximizing, which means they only really service the northeast and only have like one or two non-profitable rails. So
So I got a different question though. Isn't there a bus system called Greyhound that goes like city to city?
There is.
Yeah,
I don't know
why
anything about that.
we gotta invest in that. We gotta have it because Greyhound, as far as I'm aware, you go city to city just on a bus and it's fine, right?
I think there's some stigmas with it and like concerns for the safety of it all, but I think it is a system where you have access to much cheaper transportation like across the country and from state to state. And if we could kind of polish it a little bit, it would be something that would definitely make sense to take advantage of. And so I think like right now with flights being as expensive as they are, it's definitely a more economical option for families, but it's just the stigma that comes along with it, and I think also the safety concerns and how well maintained uh, it is.
I think that also ties into the subject of like just America's hospital, basically how safe America is compared to Europe. Because basically, pretty much, I swear it's like every day there's something on the news about like a mass shooting or like some sort of altercation of like just something revolving around a fatality within like the Atlanta metro region. So it's just I don't know. I've never lived in Europe, but I suspect that America's a lot not as safe as Europe. But I don't know.
I'd be curious to hear your perspective, his because of like your heritage. I will say that when before I was moving to Europe, there were, I think, a lot of people who are American who had never traveled out of the country who it was always coming from like a place of love and like good intentions, but they were like, just be careful, just be safe. And I think I had like a little bit of my guard up at first, but not a single time did I ever feel unsafe in Germany. Um, and that includes times like walking around in the middle of the night or returning from like a trip and then walking home from the train station to my apartment at maybe midnight or 1 a.m. I would never in a million years do that in the US. Like, I get nervous leaving the school at night and like I'll check to make sure I have my wallet and like my bag close to me. But I could walk around Germany in the middle of the night and never feel like my safety was at risk. Uh,
Soon. I'm doing something. No, something for school. I'll be 10 minutes.
it's interesting that the only or one of the only places that I've ever felt like I truly need to have my guard up is like at home in the US. So that is kind of unfortunate because I felt really safe in Germany. I felt really safe in Denmark. Felt really safe. I've always felt really safe in France. I've felt really safe in Austria, and the list goes on. Czechia, and then also again when I was in China. So I don't know. It's different. And of course, there are terrible things that happen everywhere around the world, and that's awful. But I do feel like um, sometimes maybe it's warranted, maybe it's not warranted. But there are some times where I feel like if I'm gonna evaluate that, I am probably less secure in my safety at home than when I am traveling or living abroad.
So I've got a couple stories about that actually.
Yeah.
One for America and one for Romania. For America. So my dad, he works as a building engineer, and so he's like sort of janitorial, but more high level. Like if a light's broken, he'll replace it, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And so he was doing his rounds on a bunch of different properties, and he saw a homeless man in one of the properties at one point, and it's a private property that doesn't really fly too well, and so he had to get him to leave somehow, and so he eventually just said, "All right, I'll just call the cops. It's fine." He was on the phone with trying to get a hold of the police for like 10 minutes, and they just kind of never came, and so we eventually ended the call because it was just on voicemail the entire time. And so apparently what the police do is they keep on trying to recall you, like the automatic uh messenger, the automatic robot it keeps on trying to recall you, like, hey, are you still have an emergency? Are you good? And so I don't know, homeless man ended up running away before police ever showed up. They never showed up, by the way. Um, Now of course, if it's just a homeless guy, there's no real emergency to begin with. But if my house is burning down and the police take 15 minutes to pick up the phone, that's a safety concern uh, as you discussed. And as for Romania, I do know my dad got mugged before. He was, I think, 16 or something. He hopped on a train to go to the next town over, without parent supervision. He just did it, I guess, with his brother. And they left to go to the next town over for who knows what reason. I think there might have been some kind of cool garage sale going on over there because garage sales are massive in Romania. And so he went to go get some stuff. He didn't have a ticket, so he had to jump off the train. Some people mugged him, stole all his money. He had to go back, no ticket still. Just with Romania, I wouldn't be so worried about fatalities or shootings or anything. I'd just be worried about getting mugged and losing all your money and all your valuables.
Okay.
Because I've joked about it before. The mafia, it's so there's no real Romanian mafia. It's just the government is the mafia. It's just like
I get that.
Oh,
Yeah, that's Slavic countries in general.
yeah, and so
good.
if they see you with a couple pristine BMWs in your front, driveway and you're walking around with a Rolex, you're gonna get mugged by all kinds of people. You gotta be careful.
I will say that's the only thing. So I've never been mugged or pickpocketed, but I would say that's the only like safety concern I've had in Europe in general, and that was also in Spain, like in Barcelona. Um, I saw someone from afar get pickpocketed, but like so far ahead of me, I couldn't warn them. And then you're just like, no, I feel like a bad person because I can't do anything to stop it. And then every time you leave like a hotel or any place of hospitality in Barcelona, they like warn you. They're like, there's pickpocketers everywhere. Like, be careful. Then you're just always on alert. But so if I'm being fair, that is also one that like I could say has entered like kind of my radar. And luckily, it's never happened to me, but I am aware of that being an issue. But yeah, I don't know. I've just always felt really, really comfortable, especially in Germany. And I was actually having this conversation with Sohaib and Vishnu. Um, they spent the summer in Germany and they were living with host families. And I think Sohaib was saying, early on when he was living with his host family, he came in to the house from like being outside and he locked the door immediately. And then like the family just kind of looked at them like, oh, you don't have to do that here. And it's like, it's so kind of brainwashed into it. It's like when I come home, it's nighttime right now, but even during the middle of the day, I come in this door, it is locked. All my doors are locked. My windows are locked unless like I'm cooking maybe and I have something open while I'm in the room. And then my alarm is on all the time, whether I'm at home or not. And so that's also, even if I don't live in a bad area, I've never, knock on wood, I've never had anything happen. But even just kind of what I'm prepared to deal with and the expectation of safety and even like what we have to have in the safety kind of protocols we have to have in play is like very different, I would say.
I feel that. It's just so when I walk home, it's just I mean it's not that big of a deal, but like when you when people like walk when you see people walking on the other side or like coming towards you, you just like get mentally prepared to maybe deal with something if it were to occur, but of course it never happens. Knock on wood again.
Yeah.
But
It's like doing this thing the entire time. Like, ah.
but I mean it's just that mental thought and just like into culture, I think.
Yeah. That is interesting. I think you're right. I think it's something in the culture, whether that's been part of our reality or not, and whether we're in a safe area or not. I think it's just something that it's kind of always like on our mind. Um, and that's different. That's not part of any other culture that I've experienced.
Hmm.
I'm sure that really depends on your neighborhood as well, though, because you have gated communities, and those are probably some of the safest parts of America.
Yeah.
Um, and no, I'm just thinking of more stories. There's other parts of Eastern Europe that aren't really that safe either, because you know how rules are, a lot more relaxed over there, that kind of thing.
Corruption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad has a friend.
Here, I can only speak on like Western and Northern Europe. So I haven't been to Eastern Europe yet, which again, I don't like. I have a bachelor's degree in Russian, and it's a degree I'm like never using. So one of these days, when things are safe and there's no wars going on, uh, I will go and use that degree, and be all the Russian. But so yeah, I do have to be honest. My perspective is very much just kind of centered on Western and Northern Europe.
No, Eastern Europe, there's parts that are definitely safe. Like I went to Budapest. It was just another city. It was wonderful, honestly. It was definitely more of an international city than a Hungarian city.
Yeah,
Um, but you can also get lost in the worst kinds of ways. So my dad, he has a friend that was in Bulgaria at one point, I believe, and he was driving down the highway, just a little two-lane road that counts as a highway, I guess. He took a wrong turn and he found a field of weed as far as the eye can see. And I don't know how you find this kind of thing anywhere else in the world, because just watch your step, right? Watch your step.
like an episode of like Locked Up and Abroad. It's like this foreigner stumbles on this. Yeah, Whew. That's when you leave immediately. Like,
You don't want to touch the cartels.
that's
That's it.
true. Better safe than sorry.
So yeah, just stick to customs if you can. The people that live there know what they're doing better than you know what they're doing, so just do what they're doing and you'll be fine, right?
Yeah,
That's the thing with like Eastern Europe in general. It's just all the corruption. And even though I'm Ukrainian, I don't want like physical money to be sent to Ukraine because it probably will get lost in like politics. Like probably only a fraction of it will like end up going toward the actual cause, which is like probably why most countries, well, countries have been sending money, but I prefer just sending military equipment or like any sort of equipment physically because that's a lot harder to actually be corruptible. So that's just my perspective on
we hit some heavy topics. I like with a Christmas episode. I thought this was gonna be all holidays and
that.
traditions. Talked about like infrastructure, finance, like corruption, war,
Grades.
uh, thing and policy around grades. This is some heavy hitters.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the NGHS podcast. This is what we do, right?
Off of that note, I think it's a good place to end. Solid ending point.
I am kind of curious. Can I ask if you guys are doing anything for Heiligabend tomorrow, or for the two Weihnachtstage?
I'm going to the gym to work out with my friends, but that's about it. Gotta get that bicep ready. This biceps ready.
That's right.
For
Yeah.
arm wrestle
Just
rematch.
one day you'll win.
Yeah.
One day.
Maybe
I
it'll be
believe.
when you're 70, but one day.
Um, so I'm going down to Miami actually.
Whoa. Okay. What's in?
Uh, I don't know what's in Miami.
I've never been. One of my sisters has traveled there like quite a bit, but I've never been. So
Oh, okay, so then I gotta tell you, no, you don't want to go to Miami.
It's very expensive.
No, it's ludicrously expensive. If you want to have any kind of fun, because it's Miami. It's Miami. It's the Miami Beach Boys. It's where you go for rich people to have fun, go to clubs, eat really pricey food and stuff.
I'm too old
Right.
for that. Well, not too old for the price. Too old for like clubs,
Um,
like all
I
white.
mean, even bars, just because of the area, if you want to get like a simple tap beer, you're going to have to pay like 10, 15, $20. And so it's a massive standard of living for the rich on vacations where purse pockets are cheap.
Yeah.
Don't go to Miami unless you have a lot of money that you want to spend. It's like here, think of it this way. Think of it as a really bad rundown version of Hawaii.
Oh. I'll just go to good old standard Hawaii.
Yeah, it's probably better for you.
Fair enough. Well, despite the ludicrous cost of everything, I hope you have an amazing time.
What are you doing for Christmas Eve?
So, okay, it's very cold. My plan is to go to the Christmas market in Atlanta like earlier in the day, and it's their final day. So I thought that'd be really cool. I'm actually going to meet up with some NGHS alumni. That'll be fun. Um, and then family traditions with my mother's side of the family in Roswell. And I kind of was getting. I talked to family earlier, and I was like, "Okay, what's the kind of itinerary for tomorrow?" With like the driving from Athens, I was like, "It's a long time in the car. I probably only want to stay for an hour or two, so I think I'm going to do that, and then head back home to do like our little family traditions, which include cheesy holiday movies, wearing holiday pajamas and like really tacky socks or slippers, building a gingerbread house like while watching said movie and wearing said outfit, and having hot cocoa and just feeling like the holiday energy. And then you get to open one present at midnight, and then we go to sleep, and then we open the other presents like on Christmas morning. And then I'm making the most amazing roast on Christmas Day, because Christmas Day is just about being like cozy and comfy and eating good food.
Is it
So,
a is it a beef Wellington by any chance?
so I have done a beef Wellington in the past. This is not. So I'm gonna do this is I'm doing a chuck roast. So I'm gonna do a chuck roast with carrots, potato,
Oh, sorry.
onion, all the deliciousness.
Sounds good. I wish
Yeah.
I do want to learn how to cook. I'll probably learn how to cook in college, but like
Hey,
I
you need
think
to work on college. Otherwise, you're just it's just gonna be like dining hall, and you
mhm,
gotta stuff.
I feel like cooking's just the key to happiness. You know, you can make whatever you want whenever you want and just have it be what like taste however you want, like whatever you're feeling. Like if
That's
you
true.
want, yeah,
After like a long day, put on a podcast or put on a playlist. You're just gonna lose yourself in it. You're like, what do I feel like cooking? What energy do I need right now? And then you just make that time for you. It's perfect.
if only cooking didn't take so long so you could make more stuff to eat.
So I'll probably spend 2.5 hours cooking on Christmas Day, but it's gonna be worth it. Like I tell you, I make the best roast in the entire world, and by the time it's done, like that meat is so tender, like the carrots and the veggies, it's like they just soak up all that amazing juice. It's perfect. It's everything you need it to be, and you taste it, and you're like, "This is home. This is the flavor of home." Like I have Heimat on my plate, and like you just feel cozy. If you want to feel cozy inside and out, it's my Christmas plans. So, yeah.
Sounds like
But
a
I
wonderful
had fun at the gym in Miami, and in all the cozy pajamas.
day. Anyways, I have to go. Can't keep dinner waiting for that long. So,
Oh,
Sure.
mother's already
So,
coming at me.
anybody watching this, I want to wish them a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We didn't even talk about New Year's. That's for later.
Maybe a New Year's
yeah, but
podcast.
I not throw a festa.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk
Ferocious
about New Year's
feast.
after, Beth. How about that?
There we go.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
All right. With that said, happy holidays and bye bye.